Tommy with Elevation Every Weekend. Welcome back to the channel. This is the 2025 Surly ice cream truck. Several weeks back I made a video explaining that I got a new Surly frame to build up, and it happened to be the 2025 Surly ICT, and it's in the very cool warm cheese color, which I'm really liking a lot. Seeing that I already have a 2020 ICT that I really love and it's still in action, I went on in that video to explain why I would get another Surly ICT frame, so definitely check out that video if you want to know all the details on that. I'll link that one down below. But in short, my 2020 bike has really evolved to be max capable in backcountry snow conditions, which is really all I use it for these days. And as a result of that build, it has gotten quite heavy, coming in at about 37 pounds. And the large, aggressive 5-inch tires that I have fitted to it right now just aren't as conducive for speedier performance, especially in dirt. So with this build, I not only wanted to reclaim some of the performance attributes that the stock ice cream truck has, which I always enjoyed riding in year-round conditions, but with this build, I actually wanted to go beyond that, using some lighter weight, higher-end parts, with the focus of keeping the bike's weight in check and performance in mind, and really see how that build concept matches with the all-steel Surly ice cream truck frame as I make it my own. So this is a first look video focused on showing you everything I've fitted to the bike, but I will touch on some of my future plans for ride testing, and as we get into the summer months, some other ideas I have to maybe take the build even further. And at the end of the video, I will tell you exactly where the final weight of this bike ended up. So first off, starting with the frame itself, I don't see any differences between the 2025 frame and my 2020 frame. This generation of the ice cream truck is well into its lifespan, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Surly update it in a couple years, but really I think this bike as is checks all the boxes for what you would want from a Surly fat bike. It has clearance for the largest possible tire sizes, even with the rear wheel all the way in on the sliding dropouts. It has a plethora of frame mounting points, making it a really good option for bike packing. And on my 2020 bike, I often do fit a rear rack on it now so I can haul my snowshoes into the backcountry. And it also has a port to run a dropper seat post, which my 2020 bike does have. And I feel like the ICT really has a modern geo that's spot on for a fat bike, especially assuming if you want maximum performance in backcountry snow, but also a bike that can provide great trail performance in the dirt. Of note, I did remove all of the stock steel bolts that were in the frame mounts. Not only are they needlessly heavy if you're not using them, but I also generally prefer the design aesthetic to the black frame plugs that are also much lighter weight. So getting onto the part spec, let's start at the top of the bike and work our way down. Starting with the saddle, this is a WTB Volt 142, which I've used on various bikes over the years, and it's a good solid all-around saddle. And this one actually came stock on my 2020 ICT. I may actually try a new saddle, maybe something more premium in the future, so if you have any ideas on that, let me know in the comments below. Next up is the seat post. I did contemplate getting a carbon seat post for this build, really just in the interest of cutting weight, but in the end I didn't really feel like the cost to benefit ratio was really there to justify it. And because I do have a dropper seat post on my 2020 bike, I had the stock ICT seat post laying around, so that's what I ended up fitting to this bike. Now I am absolutely an advocate for having dropper seat posts on fat and mountain bikes. The reason I had the dropper on my 2020 bike is because it really is essential for maximum backcountry snow performance, which I have done a whole video to explain that, so I'll link that down below. And of course for dirt trail riding, I think it's generally accepted and known that a dropper seat post is great for performance, fun, and safety on the trail. So while I may see a dropper in this bike's future, for now I just wanted to keep it simple and use something that I already owned. Moving on to the cockpit, Ibis Cycles actually has their carbon bars on deep discounts right now. I bought the 10mm rise version for my Trek Pro Caliber XC29er, and I've really liked those bars. So for this build, I bought a set of the Ibis 30mm rise bars, and at $69, it's pretty much a can't pass up deal. I also fitted the Ibis 40mm stem, which I ended up taking off of my DV9. So I'll be curious to see if that works well on this bike, or if I do feel I need to go a little longer in the future. And as for the grips, I'm using my go-to ESI chunky silicone grips. They're lightweight, cheap, and they add a fun pop of color to the bike. And from a performance standpoint, I've always had great luck with them as far as reducing high frequency vibration, and they don't ride too cold in the winter either. And then last on the cockpit, I added the bike bell that I add to all my bikes, which is great when you share the trail with others. So let's move on to the brakes. I'm running the solid SRAM Level T brakes on this bike with 160mm rotors front and back. While generally I always prefer the lever feel of Shimano brakes, I've used a couple sets of these Lever T brakes on other bikes, and I've always had good experiences with them, so I expect the same here. Moving on now to the drivetrain. Since the Surly ICT threaded bottom bracket is quite wide, as are the rear chainstays, which does let it accommodate the biggest tire sizes, I chose to go with a race face bottom bracket and crankset. Originally I was hoping to use a GX GX, BB, and crankset, but it just wouldn't fit. I've had really good experiences with race face products on other bikes, so again, I expect the same here on this build. And on the cranks, I decided to fit the tried and true Chester pedals, which I've been using and abusing for over 5 years now on my 2020 ICT, and they're still going strong. As for the drivetrain shifter, the chain, the rear cassette, and the derailleur, all of that is SRAM GX, which has proven to me to be a really durable but high-performing mid-range drivetrain. So now let's talk about the wheels and the tires, because this is really where the biggest departure is from the 2020 build. My 2020 bike is still running the stock Surly 26-inch wheels, and as I've mentioned, I've fitted it with aggressive, massive 5-inch tires, which really are traction monsters. However, on this bike, I'm running 27.5-inch aluminum head wheels, which from a pure performance standpoint, I really do enjoy. They are very lightweight. However, they're not really known for their durability when it comes to rim strikes. So that is something I have to be cognizant of when it comes to low tire pressure or rough trail conditions. But in the year and a half I've been running these wheels on other bikes, I've had no issues. And these tires are the Terrain 4.3-inch Yippee-Ki-Yays, which I've talked about on this channel before and really are maybe my all-around favorite fat bike tire. They are still a fairly aggressive tire and offer great traction, but they still offer lower weight, lower mass, and rolling resistance, which really helps with performance, especially at higher speeds. And that's especially when you compare it to a massive 27.5 by 4.5-inch tire, or even the 26 by 5s I have on the 2020 bike. As a direct comparison, just for reference, I pulled the front wheels off of this bike and my 2020 bike just to see what the weight difference would be between the two, and the results were 3,363 grams for the 26 by 5 setup, whereas the 27.5 by 4.3 setup came in at 3,015 grams. So that almost 350 gram difference equates to over 3/4 of a pound just in the front. I suspect in the rear it's at least that, probably more, because I know the GX cassette is lighter than the SLX cassette I have on my 2020 bike. So that kind of weight difference in your wheels is significant, especially when you factor in the rolling inertia and resistance. So safe to say I'm really stoked to see how these wheels and tires work on this ice cream truck and see if it drastically improves the feel and the performance of the bike over the stock ICT setup, which I have thousands of miles on. So there you have it. This is how I made this bike my own. Let me in the comments down below what you think, or if you'd like to see me do a full cost breakdown of this build, as I actually had a lot of these parts already laying around, so I might be curious to see what it would take to build this from scratch. And as I mentioned, I said I would give you the final weight of this bike at the end of the video. Again, for reference, my max capable build on my 2020 bike comes in at about 37 pounds. And just as a data point, that bike weighed 35 pounds when bone stock, set up tubeless. So this bike right here, as you see it as ridden in a large size frame, is right at 32 pounds. So while that's certainly not particularly light for a fat bike, especially if you compare it to carbon frame fat bikes, it still really is a respectable weight for a fat bike with an all steel frame running legitimately capable tires. And I'm really curious to see how that weight loss serves the ICT, as I always found it a really fun and versatile bike in stock form, so I'm really hopeful it'll only be better. As for the future plans, that's really going to be determined by how the bike performs once I start riding it and testing it. I will definitely be testing this bike in backcountry snow just to see how it handles those more extreme conditions, especially compared to my 2020 bike, which I've said on this channel is the most capable fat bike I've ever ridden. But I am really looking forward to getting a chance to ride this bike in summer dirt conditions and see how it handles that. And I may even start to experiment with some lighter or faster rolling tires when that time comes. As for the build spec or any changes there, the one thing that really does weigh down the ICT is the front fork, which is all steel. And really most of your handling characteristics will be impacted by the weight on the front of the bike. So probably the next major change I would make, if any, is a different front fork option. Whether it's suspension or something else to cut weight remains to be seen. So if you have any questions or comments, leave those down in the comments section down below. Really helps out the channel. If you found this video helpful or interesting, drop a like down below. It also really helps out. And if you want to follow along this build and see how it performs in the real world, definitely subscribe to the channel to not miss any of those updates. I have lots of plans with this bike for 2025 in various types of riding conditions and comparison and contrast with my 2020 setup. So lots more is coming, so stay tuned. Thanks a lot and have a great day.